Hi, this is David Juminski from St. Philip's College in San Antonio. In this video, I'm going to talk about how we use percentages in the culinary aspect of the hospitality industry. Percentages, in its simplest definition, is just basically a portion of something compared to the whole amount. So a universal formula that we can use for percentages is part divided by the whole times 100. And that will give us our percentage of whatever we are looking for. In culinary, one of the things that we look for is our yield percentage. Yield is how much product is left over. So that edible yield can then be calculated based on the average yield percentage. We can also use that to figure out how much product to purchase. So let's talk about three different terms. Our as purchased is going to be the original amount of product that we purchase and is actually either delivered or brought into our establishment. The edible yield or edible portion is the amount of that product that is remaining after we've cooked it or trimmed it or done any kind of process to it as we are preparing that item. Lastly, our yield percentage is that same amount of product that's left over, except now it's represented as a percentage, and we'll be able to look at an example in a moment about how we can apply that yield percentage to figure out either how much to purchase or how much we should expect to have left over. So let's talk about math. Now, this triangle is one of my favorites. So I recommend you go ahead and pause the video for a moment and draw the triangle just like you see it on the page. All right, so now that we have our triangle drawn, we have our edible portion on the top section. The bottom section will be our yield percentage and our as purchased. You'll notice also we have this horizontal line that represents division, and we have this vertical line that represents multiplication. So now let me show you how we're going to manipulate this tool. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually cover up what we are looking for. So in this case, our first example is the edible portion. So go ahead and cover up the edible portion. I'm going to cross it out. And what's left over is our yield percentage times the as purchased. All right, now if we're looking for our yield percentage, go ahead and cover that up. And what is remaining is our edible portion divided by our as purchased. And the last one, we cover up our as purchased, and what our formula is our edible portion divided by our yield percentage. So with this, we can now manipulate this. We don't have to memorize three different formulas. Just remember, the edible portion goes on top, yield percentage and as purchased are on the bottom. So now one resource that you can use is called the Book of Yields. And the Book of Yields essentially gives the standard yield percentage for almost any ingredient that we utilize in the kitchen. In this case, I looked it up, and romaine lettuce has a 67% yield, which means after we've chopped off the core, after we maybe have gotten rid of any kind of brown leaves, traditionally, our standard percentage is 67% of that product is going to remain. So let's take a look at how we can use that 67% yield factor. Now, if we start with 20 pounds of romaine lettuce, we are looking for our edible portion. How much of the product is actually going to be remaining so I can serve it? Again, we draw our triangle, edible portions on the top, as purchased on the bottom, and yield percentage. Now, if I'm looking for edible portion, I cross that out, and I have left over 20 pounds times 0.67. That is the 67% as a decimal. Once I do that, I know that I will have 13.4 pounds remaining. So I can anticipate having 13.4 pounds of lettuce to be able to actually serve. Now let's look at it from a perspective of how much to purchase. In this case, my edible portion is 15 pounds. I need to have 15 pounds of lettuce in order to serve all the recipes and the guests that I have coming to my restaurant. Or maybe it's a catering it. But I have the 15 pounds of edible portion that I need. That 67% yield stays the same. So in this case, I'm looking for the as purchased. I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. And what remains is 15 pounds divided by 0.67. And when I do that, I get 22.38 pounds. I might go ahead and round that up to 22.4, maybe 22.5 pounds. So this is how we can use this yield factor, this percentage, to be able to figure out how much product do I need to actually purchase. So now let's use one last example of our yield percentage. Now in this case, let's talk about fresh squeezed orange juice. Now we are going to buy oranges by the weight, maybe the pound, in this case ounces. But in reality, we're only going to have so many ounces of juice left over. So in this case, I'm going to draw my triangle just to remind myself, edible portions up top, as purchased on the bottom, and then yield percentage. So if I'm looking for my yield percentage, I take my edible portion of 24 ounces of juice, I divide that by my 40 ounces of weight of the total oranges that I start with, and I get the answer of 0.6. Now, this is where that times 100 is going to come into play. When we multiply by 100, 100 has two zeros, so we're going to move that decimal place over 2 spots and fill in the gap with a 0. So my formula here, my percentage, is actually 60%. So now I can use that 60% yield percentage to calculate either how much to purchase when I know I need a certain amount, or how much I can expect to have if I purchase a certain amount of oranges. So in summary, and to conclude, that as purchased, edible portion, and yield percentage, those three can be utilized to calculate either how much product is left over, that edible yield, or how much to actually purchase. So I hope you take this into consideration as you're looking at how we can figure out and use this percentage to help us more accurately purchase the amount of product that we need so we don't run out.